Okay, here's one done on Athena, the patron goddess of Athens, which spurned apart Greece as we know it. And this author is going to make some connections. I quite often go a few different ways because I'm trying to show you connections of all the other people that weren't involved as opposed to a Bible that comes much later. But in this instance, he's going to try to keep equating it to the Bible. And in such, and me talking about certain things, maybe we'll be able to reveal quite a lot of the truth of things. We're looking at a dish that was built that you probably aren't supposed to eat upon, of course, that shows Athena in silver and gold. Instantly comes to mind the Christmas song that Burl Ives sung of silver and gold, silver and gold. And one wonders if people's names sometimes are given to them or if it just comes out weird like that. But what is Burl Ives? And who were the Ivri and the Lost Branch? And once people clipped a tree all the way up and each branch was separated, how can we ever put the tree back together? Well, you don't. A tree is not a forever thing, but it lasts for a long time, but it in itself recreates itself. It clones itself. And there, in another generation, becomes another tree. She has some symbols here with her, one of which is a branch that you see over here at the far left, olive branch, things like this, something that you would have seen Caesar and people wrapping around their heads. Atop of which is an owl of wisdom that can be seen all the way from the temples of Inanna and the wisdom of an owl, and we still carry this today in the wise old owl and all this symbology. And you think it's all gone, but it's right there. And what this always reminds me of is Bubo. If you've ever watched the old version of the Clash of the Titans, Athena gives him Bubo to watch over him as he goes through his perils, which are much like Hercules' perils, and he ends up killing Medusa and using the head to kill off and stop the Kraken, for people are sacrificing beautiful women for some reason to this creature, and he stops it. But there's a lot to that, and even in the way I said it, it's not the way it really was. We've talked a lot about that and the way sacrifices were done and what you would do. And if the sea, Poseidon, Yam, is able to boil up and create clouds and you're in a drought, you're going to do things, sacrifice to that to try to make it happen. For there's a great body of water out here and it's unusable and salted, bitter water. But yet, at the same thing, you can evaporate this into clouds and it becomes rain and it's not salted. And this makes the fresh water, the water of life. She holds her shield. We can't see the inside of the shield, but there's a story that goes with that, and I will go into that shortly. She's wearing a cowl. Looks very much like Ares would have worn. In that cowl, if you look real closely, there are sphinxes on top of there, and the headdress of the sphinx has a plume coming out of it. Those plumes were quite often red or gold, or yellow or blonde, but quite often red, and we see that same plumage and effect, Trojans and all the old effigies that you see of them. But she has her natural golden hair floating down, although it's silver. Well, quite often someone, whenever they're blonde or golden in their youth, as it becomes an elder, your hair turns to a silver color. And there's a lot to that too, and that's not even what this is all about. But I could go off on that, and hopefully you're thinking thoughts that I would be saying. In her hand looks like a shepherd's crook to most people, but if I told you that was a snake, and the snake was under her control so much that, like in the ancient movies, she can straighten it out and make it stiff and do these things like you hear of Moses in the stories, and this is a snake, as shown by its head right there that's on it. She doesn't have an aegis, which is the lion skin that carries all the way through the trails of the Colchians and things like that. We've talked about that in other videos too. So let's go ahead and get into this now that we're kind of in the moment and got some thoughts going on about this. Before I do, though, I want to mention that the Egyptian priests were in full concert with the Greek priests on the fact that Neith, their patron goddess, was the patron goddess Athena, and it was one and the same. And if you just switch around a couple of letters, so you can take Neith and get Athena out of it. Strangely, Phoenician backwards is Greek, but if you look upon the reflection, you can read it quite well. Aha. So let's talk about the hidden identity of the woman glorified as Athena and her link to the pre-flood world. It's going to get interesting. Here's a woman that in all her splendor reconstructed the imitation Parthenon in Nashville, Tennessee. Based on the original, her ancient temple atop the Athens Acropolis, the high place of the city. Athena is a title or epithet, and we will find out her real human name as we continue. Now, there's a few things just in that statement and in it itself, so let me go back to it. Nashville, Tennessee has made a Acropolis type thing, and they have this in there, and this ancient statue that used to be of long, long ago. Ivory for her skin, gold. On her chest is a Medusa. In her hand is Nike for victory. But Nashville is close, but Memphis, going down a huge major river in America, out at its delta, is much like Memphis in Egypt, in the same place. Are things carried on from far, far in the past and we're just oblivious to it? Well, not if you pay attention. They talk about the Athens Acropolis, the high place of the city. This is a strange left field thought, but whenever I do corals, the live corals from the ocean when I grow them, some of those little sticks that grow up and look like a continuous pine cone, by the way, that keeps growing up and growing up a further pine cone, creating the skeleton that creates live rock that builds up the coral reefs. That coral is known as Acropora. People call it Acropora, but it's Acropora. Whenever they first found these things and saw them, they weren't going deep in the ocean, and they were saying that on the tops of the hills that are underwater grows these flowers, corals, and they named them Acropora. There's another one called Montipora, and it generally grows in plates and blade forms, although there's a digitate form also. And so on the mountains and the high places of the ocean, this grows, or the things close to the surface, if you will. They need a hell of a lot of light. The others don't as much, and they take up their position in the ocean. Sure, their eggs land everywhere, but over time they don't work out great if they're not in the right position. And sad to say it, millions of coral seeds float down into a depth of the ocean where nothing ever happens, but quite often those are filtered out and eaten by other creatures and so on, in the circle of life. So, Acropora or Acropora. Now, looking at this, she's a very reflective person, if you will. And looking all the way down here towards the bottom, we see on the left, whoops, on the left, a bronze statue of Thomas Jefferson in the memorial in Washington, D.C., compared to the man that's there that actually built that statue. And if you'll look at Athena, she's human-sized, whereas the other one is a giant. Well, she's a giant. Well, Thomas Jefferson's a giant too, isn't he? Make a mention here, something, just a thought. If a comet was to strike the Earth and wipe out everybody except for a few hundred people left and spotches and places around, and then we ended up coming back, and this, of course, was something like Planet of the Apes type of deal, where, you know, all that's been had gone long before, and oh, you bastards, you did it, you know, and all that stuff. What if we were to find back at this time and somebody was to find the Smithsonian and the plaza there in Washington, D.C. and walk around? Would they say, these people were giants? The people that were before us, they were giants. Look at the size of Lincoln. Hell, sitting down, I'm not as tall as his leg. These people were giants. Well, damn sure straight, they were giants. Men of old. Men of well-renowned. And that's the truth of that. Were there people that were taller than people? I've done things about giants and how I feel about that. Let's just continue. In this depiction, you see this snake that's with her, for it is her friend and companion. It is a protector in a way, but so much more. You don't want to mess with snakes. And they talked about the Pythians and all this that goes along with it. Well, that goes with Python. Python strangely goes with Typhon. You just got to mix it. But that's a typhoon and from the ocean. But no, that comes from a lot of different things. Her shield here shows a mural on the inside of it. In some circles, her shield is magical and she can look into it and see the future. Other people have made the esoteric standpoint that while she holds her shield on in the guise of an Amazon, that she can see her own future and that it is not the magic shield that you think it was, for that was the twisting of the way that you would think about it. Quite often on her other part of her shield would have been designs or things, but a Medusa head. Again, on her chest is a Medusa head, and you can see it's made of the pale ivory too, blue eyes, and so on. This is Athena. And so Thomas Jefferson is a giant. Well, this guy's a giant. He's over 6 foot tall, but oh my gosh. And then you have her, oh my gosh. Well, can you imagine, again, someone finding the Statue of Liberty? Would they have tales like in your Bible that you found that there are people who are hundreds of feet tall or some type of thing of titans and oh my God and all that type of stuff? Would they say that there was this great giant before and they were the titans, and then there were these tall people and they were around before, and then there came us, which were much smaller, and things like that come out of it? I haven't even gotten into a word of this yet, and I've been all over the place out in left field. Knowing the Sumerians and things that came from out of that, let's look into what this guy says and try to work it out where he makes connections of the Bible. Alan Lequire, who reconstructed her idol image, stands beside her, giving us an idea of the immense adoration the ancient Greeks had for this woman. But why? Well, I've placed a proportional image of Thomas Jefferson from Washington, D.C. Memorial next to her for a comparison of their relative importance. Well, I wouldn't say that it was that. If they wanted to, they could have made him much taller. Hell, if we look at the Mount Rushmore, which we just dealt with here on the 4th, you can see that his head is much bigger than, well, just his head is bigger than the giant Athena statue there, and so he would have been the size of the Statue of Liberty. If they found that in the future, would they think, wow, these are titans, these are mud flood, these are the As great as Jefferson was, his statue pales in stature next to the 40-foot tall Athena, and both of them would versus the Statue of Liberty, but that's not important, really, I guess. It's the size that counts. Maybe it's not. She is more than twice his size. Jefferson's statue is made of bronze, Athena of ivory and gold, fashioned around a wooden core. We honor Jefferson as the man who led American colonies in declaring independence from the British Crown. The ancients adored Athena as the woman who, after the flood, led most of mankind in declaring their independence from authority of Noah and his God. Yep, she throws it in left field right there. It was their independence from the authority of Noah and his God. Well, Abraham was from Ur, and he left to worship other gods. It says it word for word in your Bible. And so we're led to believe, if you think through it, that the Babylonians were the ones that had the gods that started everything out. The Sumerians, actually, when we look back at reality of the way it worked out, Babylon was just much later. It's also where we get Tower of Babel and the idea of biblos and books and the Bible. Strangely enough, the Bible is the biblos. It's the book. So, Noah and the Great Flood, and we've talked quite a bit about this, and I've done another one or two recently. 5G, oh no. He tells you that there is no creator in the Greek religious system, only deified ancestors who become the serpent's enlightenment. On the idol image inside Athena's protective shield, the Genesis serpent rises up next to her. In her right hand, she holds Nike, or victory as we know it. The meaning is self-evident to me. This woman, whose friendship with the serpent has led to mankind's victory over Noah and his God-fearing offspring. Well, if we look at the way it played out, it did definitely. The Greeks had their hand in that quite a bit, and the Phoenicians that used to be in that spot way before anybody thought about coming up with this idea of who these Israelites are. The name Israel is actually the ancient Phoenician name for the star we call Saturn. So I've showed in a lot of my videos where this all comes from, but again, as opposed to me showing you in my version how the things from the Bible are really all around it, and so there you go. This guy tries to fold it the other way, if you will. You follow me? But the meaning is self-evident. He says, this woman whose friendship with the serpent has led to mankind's victory over Noah and his God-fearing offspring. Well, Eve, in the story, in her friendship with the serpent, if you will, led towards mankind's where we are now. It's that simple. Sometimes it's not so difficult. We've talked about snake worship and how snakes shed their skin anew, and how this cocooning of a butterfly and this wrapping of a mummy is the same type of concept, and shown through different people in different ways, but variations on a theme that came far, far before. And once they came and grew to a point, they were able to make their own religious type things, if you will, that were slightly different than each other, but variations on a theme. And we've shown so many connections. You can tell that there was the connection before that, because the people in certain places are all the same ones with different names and so on. Sometimes it's easy to look and say, well, the Greek gods were gods of all over the place, Dionysus and all that. Yeah, well, two, and Jupiter, who is Dies Pater, and where does that come from? And how is it that storm gods take over all of a sudden in every one of these pantheons that we look at, and how it folds through, follows suit in everybody, doesn't it? Greek sculptors and artists consistently identified Athena with the serpent. From her Parthenon temple, her idol image below grasps the serpent that trims her aegis, yep, the sacred, a symbol of authority, and she wears a crown of serpents. So she has the mind of a serpent, but then in that same situation, isn't that Medusa? And if she is using the wisdom of the serpent and all these type of things and have a headdress that says, does something, other people could make a mockery of that. And aha, Medes came from Athens, and the ancient people that were all known as Aryans, this one group of them became called the Medes after that. I'll have to do another video on Medusa. For last time I did one, I kind of did it, went off in left field. I think this time I'll go off in right field and turn left. On the vase painting from about 500 BC, she wears a serpent-trimmed aegis as she appears to be getting instructions from the serpent. We're going to look at those pictures here in just a moment. Battle of the War Gods, Ares versus Athena, understanding ancient deities. Ooh, Garden of Eden depicted in ancient Greek religious art. Yes, yes, I'm all over it. Yes. So left on Athena's pre-Parthenon image from about 450 BC, you can see that she's wearing a headdress and everything, and somewhat looks like the Lady of Elche, but doesn't have the look of Princess Leia going on with her side dishes. She has the sacred aegis, and the serpent is woven into the trim of which they say she's using it and getting instructions from the serpent. I see it differently. I say she is using the serpent in divination. Oh, snap. Where does that Aegis come from? Who's it got to do with? Who are the Colchians? Right. Right. Pull things together, people. On the right is another depiction of her, and it's kind of covered up by the handle that's there. That's the handle right here across here. But what we're looking at is a tree, then a sacred tree, and it is wrapped up by this serpent. So somebody can see pictures like this and they can end up making a totally different ideal of the way this worked out and who was who. And at the starting of everything, there was this tree and there's this woman and da-da-da, and something went wrong because everything fucked up a long time ago and we know it, and we're going to blame that on the gods and this, that, and the other, and the reason crap keeps happening to you is because you aren't worshiping the right gods. Oh yeah, well, look at the Greeks and tell me that they didn't have something correct. And if you think the God of the Bible is all about those wandering nomadic tent people that are goat farmers in your story, look at the other people and their pyramids and their Sumerian ziggurats and everything that's kind of surrounds them at the time that they're wandering around for 40 years, and you might realize that these other people had it going on, man. In a time before time, they had it going on. And it culminates better and better and better. Look at great grandpa's car and grandpa's car, your dad's car whenever you were young, and those cars that are out nowadays. It's amazing. She wears a crown of serpents and grasps the serpent that arms her aegis, her cloak of authority. On the right is a vase from the same time period. Athena stands as if receiving instructions from the serpent, but she's looking away. Well, so did Utnapishtim, look away, when Enki spoke upon a wall before the flood and told him it was coming and to build the boat. That's again the Sumerian tale. We're going to put all that together, though, as he keeps trying to go biblical with it, okay? The ancestors put the Greek religion system in place. He makes a connection. How can we be sure she was a real woman? The answer is that self-evident as well. The Greek gods look exactly like real people because they were real people, he says. Well, in his own image, you hear in your Bible, right? And so how that works out, and flesh by flesh, bone by bone, and all these stories, works out to be, yeah, there were people. Well, if we look back in time, people were deified as gods, the Caesars, and in fact, Titus was the second coming in deifying him. I've proven that. And Jesus wasn't a liar, for he tells you that exact date. So Armageddon's already happened. And everybody sits around in a death cult, freaking out, wanting the end of the world to happen, because everything's so screwed up. Can you imagine back then, people were thinking the same thoughts whenever everything was going to crap? And everybody wanted the whole world to go to shit again during their lifetime as a selfish endeavor? In Plato's dialogue Eurythemus at 302, Socrates referred to Zeus, Apollo, and Athena as his lords and ancestors. St. Augustine understood as well that the gods were but glorified ancestors, he says in the City of God. According to the Greeks, Heracles accomplished many feats as a man here on earth. Upon his death, Nike transported him in her chariot, pulled by horses. Horses? Who are those people? Into the sky, right? To join her ancestors on Mount Olympus. And there's a mountain in the constellations. I'll get to that in one shortly. I found a video set where a guy is showing the zodiac and trying to talk about biblical passages like Noah and things like that. And I've talked before about how you can go around the zodiac and show the stories. And I'll go into how that works on real life. But ancient ancestors that did great things are deified. It still happens today, but they aren't looked at as being a god. But people still worship what they did and them and what they stood for and all these other things. And that's a shining beacon for other people in the future to keep doing those type of things and maybe take it to another step, hint, hint. And so it all works together, bettering mankind. But lo and behold, where does this all come from? Where are the Greek god, or Greek word for gods, is theo, or theoi, meaning literally placers. The Greek gods almost exclusively are the ancestors in the way of Cain, who put God shunning, serpent welcoming, and mankind exalting Greek religious system in place. That would be odd, because we know that it's supposed to be talking about the Sumerians, and they build their first cities and everything. And even in the Bible, they tell you the first cities that they built whenever Cain went to the land of Nod, built a wife, were the Sumerian cities. So how's that hook back up with them? Well, I've told you, after the flood that happens there and it ruined Sumer and the Elamites started to take over, they were pushed up over Anatolia and over to the west somewhat. This is your Abraham story. And while some veered down and into the Mediterranean there are other people that hung up a little more in Anatolia type region. Lords of Arata, all of that. And the things that come later from that, herald from that. But he tells you that's Cain. And in your Bible, Cain slew Abel. So there were a people that came and killed another people off or assimilated them and started off this thing. And in your Bible, it starts off in the very first thing. Well, in Genesis, let's analyze that just a little. There's one of them who is a farmer, and one of them who raises cattle, and they do their sacrifice to God, and God apparently prefers one over the other. The other gets so jealous that they go and kill him off and or assimilate him, and then the other person's there. But the land of Nod, well, Nod's when you go to sleep. And so at this time, all of a sudden, the gods went to sleep and they weren't paying attention, and people went to sleep also. And we kind of woke up and went back to sleep. Woke up, went back to sleep. You know, when you just can't wake up and you have that feeling, people have had that. There's been this weird dreams that we've been having. Sacred weird dreams. People did a lot about dream interpretation. Even in your Bible, where that would sound a strange thing, Joseph and everything, that was his claim to fame. I'll leave that there. Let's continue. We build grand monuments to our own accomplished ancestors. They look like temples because they are temples. Inside the Lincoln Memorial, we read, "In this temple, as in the hearts of people for whom he saved the Union, the memory of Abraham Lincoln is enshrined forever." Inside ancient Athena's temple, her idol image undoubtedly evoked a similar sentiment, something akin to this. In this temple, as in the hearts of the people for whom she brought back the way of Cain and the serpent's enlightenment after the flood, the memory of this adored woman we call Athena is enshrined forever. Well, Cain's bad and this, that, and the other. Well, you know, Satan is the adversary, and I'll be damned if the Greeks weren't the adversary of some of these people in the Middle East at times, huh? So he tells you in this temple the way of Cain and the serpent's enlightenment. And snake worship and bullshit, da da da, and all that. No, well, it's saint, it's rebirth. It connects to everything. The caduceus that we still use today. For the snake can bring health as well. There's so much to it. And it's still today. And you think, oh, people that do snake worship, they're freak out people and Appalachians that still grab snakes and da-da-da and everything. And, you know, they're inject themselves with enough of the rattlesnake venom to where if it even bites them, it doesn't kill them. But sometimes people haven't done that or milked them preemptively before they mess with them. And therefore they end up getting bit. But who's to say that you had to use a rattlesnake? Couldn't you use a king snake like in the Moses situation? Because it's not a poisonous situation. He kills and eats other snakes. So when the Egyptians threw down their snakes, he threw down a king snake and it ate the other snakes. Ta-da! Inside that temple, though, it's the same type of thing, but we're in a totally different realm of thought, aren't we? How different is it? Well, we're just not taking it to the nth degree, but with the certain things that have happened recently, oh, Lincoln, and all these people are being thrown up again, aren't they? We won't talk about that. We learn from Acts 17:23 that Paul stood on the Areopagus, that's the hill of Ares, in Athens. Read the pedestal there. It says, "To the unknown God." Next to where Paul stood towered the Acropolis, the precinct and the way of Cain, with Athens' temple and her idol image to the summit. She is the reason that God was unknown to the Greeks and most of the rest of humanity as well. In the oldest written Greek, known as Linear B, she was Athena, short for Athanatos, meaning the deathless or immortal one. And if we take off the front of that, people know who Thanos is and how that was taken even into modern movies. Well, the oldest written Greek is Linear A too, not Linear B. They haven't really deciphered Linear B well, so they're not talking about that. And then there's, of course, a scratch script that is well before that. that looks like it connects to ancient Ireland and other things, but that's another video. As he points out in his new full-color book, Genesis Characters and Events in Ancient Art, Athena seemed immortal in the post-flood world because she had come through the flood, bringing the long pre-flood lifespan possessed by Noah and his sons and their wives. She was, in fact, one of those wives. Naima is her name, the conniving wife of Noah's son Ham. Oh snap. I've made connections recently where it shows you Japheth is Iapetus, but that is Jupiter, and how that plays out with the Noah thing, and then how Ham gets cursed and all this type of stuff that comes from this. So hopefully we have that loaded in and don't have to go into it, for we're at 35 now. If this goes to a part 2, it'll be in your top left-hand corner. Let's try to get through this. The marriage of Ham, Chiron, and Naima, Chariklo. I'm not going to be able to get through it. She is the last person mentioned in the line of Cain in the Bible. And the sister of Tubal-Cain is Naamah. Now, Tubal-Cain is known as the people who started out making iron and things, and if we realize who that really was back in the ancient times, and it was the same people but a different aspect, where that comes from, right? And Hephaestus and that concept. So quite often a whole people can be deified or looked upon as being one creature, and that creature represents the whole people too. She was the daughter of Lamech, the last ruler of the Canaanites before the flood. Greek artists depicted the courtship and marriage of Ham and Naamah on several ancient vases under their Greek names, Chiron and Chariklo. Now we're going to start seeing pictures of them, and you're going to see these horse people and these people that brought horses to people. They were giants, but if you're sitting on upon a horse, you're a damn giant. And they're carrying a branch signifying the Ivri, just as it's said that that's it. For even Abraham and stuff is not looked at as being, that's the first person that's listed as a Hebrew. That all before that, he doesn't say that. He deifies him as being that, but it says Ivri, and that's not even Hebrew. Understand that. Then nowadays they go, oh, da da da, and it's like, that's not what that says. And that's not what that means. So on a vase from about 500 BC, 3 centaurs walk in line, 2 of them carrying a branch, signifying they belong to a different branch of humanity, the line of Seth, as opposed to the supposedly cultural and intellectually superior line of Cain. We look at these people and who they thought barbarians were, but also we know that they said barbarians were people that were bearded and that you should stay clean shaven, and really it's all about that and the fact they wouldn't speak Greek. We look at it here and they're shown as being blondes and then redhead. Well, are they black? Well, the horses might have been dark somehow, but no, of course not. That's all shown in Greek art, just like they use red ochre quite often for the skin of people and pale for women, just like in Egypt, just like the Minoans, just like Etruscans, Mitanni, all the people around here using this in their art, and it's because of the dyes and things, and you have about 4 choices here in the natural look of pottery, so we're going to go with that. They talk about the line of Seth. We've talked about how that works with Set, and Set is somebody that's in Egypt, and he takes a part in that major pantheon there. And who's Seth? Well, Adam and Eve, after they had Cain and Abel, they had another kid. It was supposed to have replaced Abel. Oh, snap. Ding. Take a deep breath here for a second. Fit that puzzle piece in. Let's continue. Ham, Chiron, was one of the men in the line of Seth. Greek artists depicted Seth men as centaurs, half men, half horses, almost always showing them bare-chested, often carrying a branch as above. in that picture, indicating that they belong to an inferior branch, he says, of humanity as opposed to the supposedly superior cultured man elevating line of Cain. Well, if we look in it, that it was really from the three children that were there, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, and we can see how that worked out over time and who was who. Now, Noah's curse, where, of course, he was just a man and not a god, so he can't put a curse on somebody that works out, and truth and reality is shown whenever he says who's going to be the servant and servant of servants, and how that really worked out versus what the people of the Bible wanted to work out. They wanted it to be about them, but if we take them and set them aside and just look at what happened and what came out of it, regardless of these people still going off this book, reality shows us something else, doesn't it? Here's a picture of this golden or red-headed guy, and he looks like he's choking this woman and grabbing her by the arm, but this actually is a signification that she is his, and he's not choking her. He's about to pull him to her as he's speaking to her, and hopes that he garners her kiss. So he says that she grasped the wrists of Naima, Chariklo, as a sign in the ancient Greek art that he is to be his bride. The artist made a special exception for this Seth man, Ham Chiron, depicting him with the full front of a man because to them he was the good centaur. He brought the Canaanite princess, Naama Chiklo, through the flood as his wife. In the above vase depiction from about 600 BC, Ham Chiron takes the wrist of Naima as a sign in the Greek that she is to be his bride. Naima's great-grandfather had a name, Mehuel. In Genesis 4:18 it says that. Well, it means wipe out God. People say, well, all that's wipe out by God. That signifies they have all these names. And you wonder about these strange names they have in the Bible, and it's odd that you can find out that they all have meanings. And most people's names, if you look nowadays, don't have a meaning, which means what you've done. So whenever they give them that name, that may not necessarily be their original name. Just like the Egyptian pharaohs had a real name, but they don't use that. You don't want to use their real name. You use their pharaoh name. Wipe out God. That's the mindset Naima brought with her through the flood as Ham's wife. There is no doubt in my mind that she is the one responsible for Ham's mocking attitude towards his father Noah, related in Genesis 9:20 to 27. Naima Athena inspired and directed the resurgence of the way of Cain in the post-flood world as her son Cush Hermes and her grandson Nimrod Hercules, and was exalted for that reason. So he put a whole lot together right there, didn't he? Well, again, the Sumerians and the tale that goes in your Bible say that this flood wasn't supposed to happen again, that it had already happened before. There was a bow in the sky about this. Well, sometimes that bow is said to be at night and in the stars, and so that can't be a rainbow. And we'll get to that in another thing about the zodiacal finding of it and everything. But, so we're going to end right here, guys, and go on to the next part in this next moment. But let me tell you that, and I'll catch this and continue, but after the Tower of Babel, mankind adored Naima by many titles, including Lama, Astarte, Ishtar, Hathor, Isis, Ma'at, Artemis, Diana, Inanna, Asherah, and ultimately in their most glorious idolization is the great Greek goddess Athena. Part 2 is coming up in your top left-hand corner. Click that and we'll go on to part 2, and I'll meet you there. Click like and come back and make a comment, if you will. We'll see you there.